My next guest is Congresswoman Grace Meng from New York. Improving internet access and closing the homework gap are a key priority for her. She recently sponsored the Success Act, which provides additional funding so students continue to get the support they need for distance learning. Congresswoman Meng, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today at The Hill. I'm having so much fun with this topic, much more fun than I thought I was going to have. I think that one of the questions I have, so I've talked to Jessica Rosenworcel many times. She's the chairwoman of the FCC, a good pal of mine, and I have seen her obsessed for now decades with E-rate, making sure that we have infrastructure facilities in not just libraries, but in schools, and we have this stuff that we look at the homework gap that developed, particularly during the COVID period of time. So I would ask you, as a fellow traveler in that arena, what aren't we getting right yet that we still have to address?
Well, I'm so glad that you're covering this topic. I'm so glad that you're excited about it. Many of us were probably much later to the game than our chairwoman Rosenworcel, who knew and had the vision very early on and what our country and government needed to do better. I actually started working on this issue a little bit before COVID. I had spent some time traveling around the country and just met so many children and families who didn't have affordable access to the internet. And I just thought, as an American, how can we let this happen in this great country? And realize that even in my home city of New York, about 30% of our kids don't have access to the internet. And so I'm so glad that, unfortunately, even though it was because of the pandemic, we gained so much momentum and so much attention to this very issue. And because of the pandemic, there was a lot more motivation to start getting some of these programs better funded. And hopefully they will continue to last even beyond the pandemic.
Representative Meng, let me ask you perhaps an unfair question, and I don't expect that every member of Congress knows the answer to all problems, so we'll get that on the table. But I've talked with Brian Hendricks of Nokia, as I was speaking to him earlier today, many times about this, that if it was just a money problem, we would have solved it. That the challenge in broadband connectivity, both in urban centers, rural areas doing this, is it's not just money. It's not one size fits all in achieving what we need to achieve. So I guess my question is, what is your experience as you discuss this with your colleagues? Are we missing the need to create some nimbleness and flexibility in the way these partnerships come about? Are we setting the wrong expectations? Is there no accountability? It's just, I want this topic to go away and be fixed. And I'm just trying to figure out how you get there and what's not happening as we try to figure out the last mile connectivity to places that aren't getting it.
Sure. And I don't even know if we are even at that last mile yet. I think that the country has really woken up during the pandemic because all of a sudden people realized that access to the internet was just like how we need to utilize electricity and clean water in this day and age. I remember when my children first started going to school, I asked them one day to show me their textbooks. And they laughed at me. They said, "We don't use textbooks anymore. We just go to the websites on our computers." And that was one of the earlier moments where I said, well, what happens if a child does not have access to a device and to the internet? And so even though I am really proud of the progress that Congress has made and the investments that Congress has finally been able to increase during the pandemic, I know that there's a lot more that we have to do. People in the industry will talk about the actual infrastructure from small towns, rural communities to urban areas, and that's a bit above my pay grade, but what I want to do is to make sure that we're doing our part in government, funding the programs adequately. We were literally in the midst of a global emergency, and we wanted to do what was the quickest thing possible, which is to fund these E-rate programs, to have programs like the Emergency Connectivity Fund, to be able to get as many families access to the internet as quickly as possible. And we were able to do that. And we would love to be able to continue doing that on a permanent basis as well, because it's not just for schoolwork anymore. People are using this for telehealth. There's so many other reasons why people need access to the internet.
I want to tell our audience that you're the founder and co-chair of the Kids Safety Caucus. You're the co-chair of the Children's Caucus. You've got children on your mind a lot. This may seem like an out of left field question. I think as we bring on more children at an earlier stage into digital environments, one of my areas of personal concern has been book banning. It's been a level of censorship out there. But I also know that there are real concerns about what children experience in the digital world, and because they are engaged in the digital world, when you sort of think about this, about how we assure a child's safety, but also a child's development in a civil society in America where they become well-educated, resilient contributors to American democracy and society. What are the right guardrails in some of these debates that we're having right now, which to me seems so weird? It seems like we're back in the 1930s sometimes.
Yeah, it is tricky. And for many of us, or most of us, this is sort of uncharted territory. With things like educational technology in general, we are working on more oversight in the industry, in the field, talking to experts and stakeholders, because I think as we see the digitalization of so many resources in the education space with our schools and libraries, we need to think about having greater oversight to begin with. And so that's something that we're starting to take a closer look at. As a parent, personally, it makes me really uncomfortable, right? Like, I don't know at any given time necessarily what my child might see on the internet, on their Instagram, and I'm still in the process of learning some of these technological outlets myself as well. But, part of being a parent, regardless of what that space looks like, it's to try to set reminders and try to teach our young ones to have good decision-making skills themselves. If something pops up on their social media, or if they see something that they have questions about, I want to make sure that I am someone where my children feel 110% comfortable in coming to me and approaching me with questions. We are not going to be able to oversee and control everything that comes across their screen.
Well, thank you for that. We're taking questions from the audience, and we have a question for you from Justin Jackson from the Blue-Green Alliance. Justin?
My name is Justin Jackson, and I'm the press secretary for the Blue-Green Alliance. Thank you for having me, and thank you for taking my question. My question: how large of an issue is the physical infrastructure needed in order to still connect more Americans online and begin those early stages of a connected society? What provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law got the ball rolling on building out America's connectivity, but still perhaps needs to be built upon and was just maybe a first step in that direction? Do you think data storage, transmission, and distribution play a large role in this conversation? And if so, how large of an issue? Thank you.
Big questions, Justin. But if you have some, quick answers, Representative, we would love them.
Yeah, those are great questions, and I probably can't fully answer them. But like we mentioned before, infrastructure is something that is important. And I know I've heard this from everyone from stakeholders to the average community member in rural towns to our urban areas like my hometown of New York. The infrastructure bill did provide for about $65 billion in broadband investments. And that's something that I'm hearing from folks all over the country that they believe will be life-changing and such important investments, and hopefully more to be made as well. We are still working. I'm working with Senator Ed Markey on something called the Success Act, which would provide for about $8 billion for the Emergency Connectivity Fund. This is something that would help us go beyond just the original brick and mortar approach of the E-rate program. something that we saw benefit a lot of families, including our students, where they were not able to be on a campus or in a library to be able to take advantage of the E-rate program necessarily. And so that's something that if I had a wish, we would at least now make that fund a permanent one.
Well, I really appreciate the time with you, and I hope that Senator Ed Markey has been with me many, many times. I hope we can come back and discuss the Success Act. Maybe we can build in Jessica Rosenworcel, because I think one of the real challenges, one of the topics out there, just tell folks, and I can kind of feel you're wrestling with it, is technology is sort of neutral in a lot of ways. You need to kind of get it out there, but there are some communities that are not yet built around it. There may be demand we're not filling, but there may not be demand, and I've been really impressed with the FCC's work to try to reach underserved communities and how to find trusted ambassadors in the process, it's not the same everywhere, and I just would love to continue that dialogue with you. Representative Grace Meng of New York, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.